All right. So Basi Lgani, as we said, is this kind of masterwork that is going through the leading the way into the 20th century, 21st century of Chabad by presenting what would be the vision in order to be able to create this military, so to speak, this Chabad military. And of course, it's ironic that today I'm on base and I'm giving this class in uniform, because what we're going to be talking about is the idea of a military and the idea of what's referred to in the Hebrew as Netzach. And so we started talking about the concept that the term that the Jewish people are referred to, just as they're leaving Egypt to go to Israel, is Tzivot Hashem, the army of God, or the legions of God. And we said that that's an allusion to God's name of Tzvaot, which is a name in which God relates to the world in such a way of within the limitations of the world, within the systems of the world. And in this system, we need to elevate the sparks. We need to find godliness wherever it is. So this is a much more limited term for God. And it references a war, because a war is all about victory. Victory is all when there's a struggle of some type. And when we're talking about this level of godliness, it's being concealed. It seems like the world is not conducive to godliness. And so we have the name Tzvaot that's given to us by the later prophets, because those later prophets were living in times of greater and greater hiddenness of godliness, of concealment of godliness. And so therefore the Jewish people needed to access a new, not brand new, but an element of energy that would allow them to be able to fight these battles. So that's what we explained the term Tzvaot, that's where it's coming from. The name Tzvaot is specifically connected to the attribute of God, which is Netzach, which is victory, which is, of course, related to the concept of a military. The purpose of a military is to be victorious in war. And that's where we start at the beginning of chapter 19. And again, we're going to skip a little bit, and I apologize because your text is not going to be exactly the same way my text is because of the issues that I have, which now might be resolved. I hope they'll be resolved, but we'll, in the meantime, there we go. Now it's working. Hang on just a second. Let's see. There we go. Oh, there we go. Come on, keep working. Fantastic. Okay, so now we're actually on the same page. So returning to the army of God, the attribute of seeking victory is rooted in the very core of the soul, which transcends the conscious faculties of revealed will and of intellect. When a person wants to be victorious, sometimes they accomplish things that you would never think are possible. The greatest athletes have a way to seemingly will themselves into victory. And that's what we're talking about, where it transcends everything. And that's the thrill, of course, of sports is just a continuation of the thrill of war. And in my humble opinion, and this is a side note, it's interesting how, for the most part, sports has transplanted war, whereas in the past, war was something that every child was brought up to look at as something. This is what I want to do. I need to be victorious for my country or for my governor or for my state or whatever it was. And every nation state fought with the nation state right next to it. Nowadays, by and large, the nations are fairly united, the United Nations. And this is coming from the perspective that, of course, is as the result of World War I, World War II, and the massive amounts of damage done there. And of course, we still have the struggles of the great powers, but not nearly to the same degree that this was in the bulk of history. But that's just a side point, and that's my own personal reflection on it, and so you can take it or leave it. getting back to the concept here that the element of victory, it goes really down to the core of who we are. And he says it is this attribute that reveals and draws down the heavenly store of treasures. What does that mean? In order to overcome the enemy in a time of war, even secret vaults are opened. Though the distribution of treasure must be entrusted to ministers and officers, the ultimate intent is that all the priceless wealth be handed over to the rank and file soldiers, for it is they who will actually secure the victory. So we expend treasure in war. We expend money in war. We take the treasure of the country and we spend it so that the rank and file has the capability of being able to fight the war. And sometimes we even have elements of the military that have remained secret, have remained the crown jewel, so to speak. And in order to be victorious, we need to bring that out. And that's going to be an important idea throughout the past momentarily, but this is a very, very, very crucial.
Rabbi, I couldn't hear that last. Rabbi, I couldn't hear you because the signal was so weak, and it blanked out.
Sorry.
Again, the same thing happened.
I said that
we cannot hear you, Rabbi.
Idea of giving.
No.
Do you not hear?
No.
You're frozen as well.
No, your voice is not coming through clear. It's like a musical voice.
And you're frozen now.
I'm sorry. Nope, even worse. Hang on a second.
That's better.
Just a moment.
No.
It's better?
Yeah.
Is it better?
The word better we can hear.
Any better? Any better? Is it better now?
Yeah.
A little bit.
Okay. We're going to do this slightly outside. The Air Force is not exactly known for its internet capabilities for some reason. So, but bear with me. So the idea of expending treasure is, of course, an important part of military might. You know, you have the treasure of the nation, and that's spent in order to be able to be victorious. And we're going to see in just a moment that this is something that the Rebbe really took very, very seriously. But let's just finish the idea here, the paragraph here. This concept is alluded to in the phrase Netzach Yisrael, which is translated literally as the victory of Israel. The victory is for Israel and by Israel, for the Jewish people and by the Jewish people. Since the Jewish people are called the army of God, the treasure houses of heaven are opened up for them to enable them to vanquish the enemy and to secure the victory of Israel. So what's this talking about? So there are the ideas that are referred to as the secrets of Torah. Okay, they're considered the treasure houses, so to speak, of the Jewish people. And they're, generally speaking, throughout history, these were kept absolutely personal, so to speak. They were kept only for the greatest of the great. And they were alluded to in certain books, and certain rabbis were taught them to handpick disciples. And that's just the way the system always worked. On the other hand, in the Rebbe's leadership, under the Rebbe's leadership, the Rebbe was made responsible for the printing of Hasidic books. And not only was he involved with printing Hasidic books, but he was even involved with explaining and elaborating even the most deepest of spiritual ideas to anybody. And not just in Hebrew, not just in books that are written in cryptical form, but even translating these ideas into many, many different languages so that anybody can be able to access them. So this is basically what we refer to as expending the treasure of the Jewish people on the opening out and emptying out the treasure houses in order to be able to secure the Messianic victory, because ultimately the purpose of the Messianic victory is to be able to have the revelation of godliness. And that revelation of godliness starts with the understanding, the perceiving and recognizing of godliness. And even though these ideas are very deep and very powerful, and until this point they were kept by and large secret, the Rebbe started opening them all out. And so that's, again, another element of this mimer that you see ends up being a hallmark of the Rebbe's leadership and a crucial part of the so to speak army of the Jewish people that the Rebbe created from the 1950s and on. And the previous Rebbe continues and says, on the verse, make known to me the way of light. There's a related teaching of Medrash Shocher Tov. David HaMelech asks God, Master of the universe, make known to me the way of life. Said God to David, is it life that you want? Look inside the Torah, for considering the Torah is written, it is a tree of life for those who hold fast to it. The verse continues, there's fullness of joy in your presence, literally with your countenance before you, panecha, lefanecha. On this there's a comment of Medrash Rabbah, which the word sova, meaning fullness, reads sheva, meaning 7. For there are 7 degrees of joy among those who gain upon the divine countenance. So this verse in Tehillim is sova smachot et panecha, that a person is satiated with joy, a person is filled up with joy in your presence. And so the Medrash says that the word sova, which means satiated or full, means sheva, which means 7, because there are 7 degrees of joy. And so now we're getting back to the beginning of the mimer when we spoke about the 7th generation. We're talking about this conclusion, so to speak, of this series of 7. The verse continues and says, Ne'imot biyamincha netzach, bliss is at your right hand forever. But the word netzach, as mentioned earlier, can either mean forever or victory. Will tell us which of these groups is the most cherished, the most blissful. And the Medrash continues by saying, one answer is those who come with the power of the Torah and the mitzvahs. Another answer is these are the teachers who teach little children in the path of truth and who are destined to stand at the right hand of God. The Medrash concludes, this is what is contained in the phrase, bliss is at your right hand forever. All the above comes because of hang on a second. Sorry. There we go. All the above comes out because the attribute of securing victory is related to Israel. So the concept here we're saying is very, very interesting. He's mentioning several ideas which the Medrash speaks about, as the Medrash typically does, in a very cryptical way. But in the context of this mimer, you see several ideas. You see the idea Sheva, which means 7, and Sova, completion and fullness, that is related to the victory of the Jewish people. Okay. You see that the victory of the Jewish people is related to emptying out the storehouses of Israel. And you see that all of this is related to this concept that he mentions over here, the teachers who teach little children in the path of truth. So getting back to this concept, what was the very hallmark of what was or the beginning of the Rebbe's leadership was teaching children. And throughout his leadership, and this is remarkable because of the fact that most teachers do not focus on most great leaders on the adults.
You lost some voice, so we didn't hear the last couple sentences. You still don't have your voice.
Oh, man. Any better? Any better?
Now it's better, but temporarily, I guess.
Boy,
Keep going.
Keep going. We're okay.
Yeah, so far.
Okay. Okay. So the idea of teaching children related to the messianic victory and related specifically to the seventh generation are all intertwined in this mimer. I apologize. I'm insanely busy, and I'm getting people calling me.
Yeah, you don't have any control over it. It's your bandwidth.
Yeah, and I'm also getting calls because we've got several things that are
that cuts into your voice.
Rabbi, we understand that. Don't worry.
No. Thank you. I appreciate it. So let's reflect on this just before we finish this mimer with this final little statement here.
Can't hear you again.
Children are typically looked at in such a way that they should be seen and not heard. They're typically looked at, man, this is really frustrating. I apologize. Any better?
Yes.
Yeah, it comes and goes. Now you're frozen.
Any better? Sheesh. Any better?
Yeah.
Any better out here?
A little better.
Okay. All right. In order to go outside, I need to wear my caps. I had to make sure to go get my caps before.
Okay.
Went completely out. All right. Is this better? We're still good?
It's mixed. It's mixed.
Good or not good?
It depends which way you're moving. If you stay still, maybe it'll be good.
I'm trying to find a better spot. How's this? Any better?
Yeah, now it's better.
Okay. All right. So the approach that most leaders have to children is rather seen and not heard. You know, the general approach is that for anybody's attention. You know, you need to teach them, you need to bring them to a certain place so that they're eventually adults, and then they're worthwhile of attention. And the Rebbe obviously took this incredibly seriously, because the Rebbe's approach to children was unlike almost any leader that I've ever heard of, where he put a massive amount of effort in both in terms of educational program. Freezing again?
Yeah, you have to focus your eyes on one target and then stay there and we'll be fine.
Me?
Yeah. When you're moving your head, then you're
What's wrong? Okay. I apologize. I've got this on a laptop on my lap. So the Rebbe's personal attention to children was unlike any other major leader that I've ever heard of. You know, when the Rebbe spoke, and especially in the last years, I have friends who were actually sitting underneath his table. And there's actually a quite humorous story about this whole thing. There was a Farbrengen where the Rebbe was talking, and towards the end of the Farbrengen, it seemed like it was dragging out for no particularly good reason. And there was singing one song after another song after another song. And then at some point, finally, the Rebbe got up and, walked out. But there was like an extension of extra songs, so to speak, that people were wondering, why did the Rebbe drag it out like this? Well, it turns out that the little children were sitting underneath his table. And they were bored in this Farbrengen, so some of them were tying the Rebbe's shoelaces and untying the Rebbe's shoelaces. And when they did that, they actually tied up a knot, and they couldn't untie his shoes. And the Rebbe didn't put any, didn't pay any attention to this. Didn't look like he was looking down or anything of the sort. And it was only when the kids underneath the table started kind of freaking out and they're pushing and shoving, and that one of the adults looked underneath and saw what was going on and quickly bent down and untied the knot that they had made. And that was when the Rebbe said, okay, and walked out. So the Rebbe's concern for these children to make sure that they weren't embarrassed is quite remarkable. But besides for that, just think how difficult it is for any of us to get up and speak publicly, let alone explain difficult ideas while you have 15 or 20 kids packed at your feet and they're busy tying and untying your shoes. I mean, it's just like the concept is mind-blowing. But the Rebbe's concern for children was that each child is part of this victory. Each child is a critical part. And so therefore, it's not just, well, like we said, children should be seen, not heard. These children need to be uplifted. They need to be given the positive attention. They need to be given the capabilities and the spiritual abilities to be able to succeed into the future, into their adult future. As a child, I myself was at several Farbrengens, and I remember the last Lag BaOmer parade, and they started these parades for children back even in the 40s, and that's quite incredible. The concept of a parade for Jewish pride back in the 1940s is just mind-blowing. But that's when the Rebbe started these things. And they went throughout the year. They would have a massive Lag BaOmer parade on a Sunday. So on any time that Lag BaOmer came out on a Sunday. So in 1991, I was 11 years old, and I was in this Lag BaOmer parade. And I remember listening to the Rebbe speak, and I did not speak Yiddish. And the Rebbe was talking for quite a while. And I remember thinking, Rebbe, please speak to us. Talk to us as who we are. The understanding of what was going on was not big enough to understand. The Rebbe was not just speaking to us as children. The Rebbe was speaking to us so that we have what to give our children. And that's the critical concept, that we have to realize that in order to be able to be successful and to bring this victory that we're talking about, it's not just about the here and now. It's also about taking the children and making from the children the future trees, the future giants, the future soldiers. That's what the Rebbe took out from this idea. And that's what the Rebbe created, this club, the Tzivos Hashem, the army of God, which was a children's club. And that's what the whole process has begun. Of course, that children's club has expanded in a way that's gone beyond any of our imagination. My children are involved with studying the 613 mitzvot, memorizing them in ways that I don't even dream of. I myself, my kids are asking me questions that are so complex that I need to look up the sources and try to figure it out. And that's all part of this club that the Rebbe created, because the Rebbe saw that children are a key to the victory. And that's the way it is. And then the previous Rebbe in the Maimer concludes, in general terms, the victory described as the victory of the godly soul over the animal soul. When a man overcomes his animal soul through his divine service in Torah, mitzvos, and prayer, he causes a victory above the conquest on a cosmic soul scale of the forces of evil. As for this sake of this conquest, the treasure houses of heaven are thrown open. So again, my apologies that today was a little bit all over the place. I will, God willing, send you the next mimer over the next few days. Until then, and on Friday, God willing, it'll be back to normal and normal Wi-Fi and normal circumstances. But with that, I want to wish everybody have a wonderful day. Is Rabbi Smith in here? He is not yet.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Oh, there he is. Okay. All right. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
Thank you,
you.
Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. Sei gesund.